Hi, this is Doug Kreitzberg with SeedPod Cyber. Welcome to another podcast of Click Happens. And today I'm really happy to two members of our team, Sinclair Morris, our account executive, who works with our MSP partners, works with businesses, helps them navigate their way through cyber insurance. How you doing, Sinclair?
Good. How are you?
Good. And also, he still has the new car smell about him. He's just recently joined us, Kyle Saudi. He is our Chief Revenue Officer and EVP of Underwriting. Kyle, welcome.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
That's great. Really excited to have you on and working with us today. You know, as the beginning of a conference in Philadelphia. Called Net Diligence, and Net Diligence is really regarded as the premier source of cyber insurance information. And these conferences are where the carriers, brokers, law firms, incident response companies all come together to learn and to share from each other of what's going on in the cyber insurance marketplace. And they, Net Diligence releases a claims report every year. It's hot off the press, and I thought it would be good to just touch on that because there's some things going on broadly in the cyber insurance marketplace, and also some questions that are arising as we're getting more information. Overall, cyber insurance rates are down. There's a lot of new players who have come into this cyber insurance arena looking to solve the problems that businesses have with regards to protecting their digital assets and their balance sheet from digital attacks. At the same time, it seems like the bulk of the market has been concentrating on kind of that upper middle enterprise space. And the small businesses just haven't, got the memo yet. There's reports that the market share of small businesses with regards to cyber insurance is only 10 to 20%. So that means that, 80% of small businesses, which represent the vast number of small businesses, don't have cyber insurance today. At the same time, if you look at the claim side, the claims are sitting with the small businesses. 98% of all claims are coming from the small business space, and 49% of the costs are hitting small businesses. So they're being disproportionately targeted here, and yet they don't have insurance here. And so we're going to spend some time really trying to understand this, unpack this, and see if there's a direction forward here. So Sinclair, kind of what is your take on this? Small businesses, they read in the newspaper every day somebody's getting attacked, and most of the time, although it may not hit the newspaper, but it's going to be them or somebody just like them. Why aren't they pulling the trigger and buying the cyber insurance?
Yeah, I think it's a multi-pronged issue. And it's interesting too, because I think the answer is a little different depending on where the business is, right? So with that stabilization that we've seen in the market, with that, we've seen increased requirements from a security standpoint to even get this line of coverage. So when you're working with the small businesses who haven't quite made it to working with an MSP for their security, it kind of makes the point of entry, I think, a little more difficult. And then for those that are investing with, they're working with a managed service provider, I think there's this really dangerous assumption that their MSP has them fully protected. So there's really no need for this line of coverage, right? Which is dangerous, as you said. 98% of claims between 2019 and 2023 were small to medium-sized businesses. And of course, you don't, hear about those on the news quite as much. The losses aren't as severe, but to a small to medium-sized business, it's much more catastrophic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's a couple good points there. So what I'm hearing is, a lot of businesses haven't yet, that there's a high barrier to entry now because they need the cybersecurity services solutions to get insured. At the same time, once they get those, they feel that who's ever providing those cybersecurity services are really covering them, so they don't need the insurance anyway. Um, that's interesting. Kyle, kind of what's your take on this?
Yeah, I love Sinclair's points. I think, you know, first on the point around, you have a service provider, you have a managed service provider, a security firm that's helping protect you. They're working so hard, right, to do that. But I always go back to a really good old adage: the Titanic could sink, right? Everybody knows that adage, and that's something to always think about because at the end of the day, these threat actors they're very intelligent. They're using AI, they're using other functions to get through. So what you want to do is protect yourself as best as you can through service provider, MSP, that sort of thing. But understand that you're always susceptible. When I look at the small to middle market space, a lot of carriers nowadays are, if you look at their portfolio, it's really either like a triangle like this, upside down triangle, where there's a lot of middle market, large risk business, that sort of thing, that are saturated buyers. But when I look at the SME space, I think there's still a pretty big lack of education there, that all of us can do a better job, because at the end of the day, if small middle market businesses don't understand the coverage, and again, I think it was said earlier that if it's just another coverage they need to buy, they're kind of asking why, and why do I need this? I think of three things that can kind of help in that space. I think if the market can do a better job of ease of getting quotes to clients so they can kind of look at the coverage, and then education with that, better understand what that coverage is doing, and then value add services around that, not just an insurance policy, but really what else can you do for the client to help them understand it.
Right, right. And when we talk about understanding and communicate or education, what are the kind of the areas that they really, if we could only pick three things to teach them, what would those three things be? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, I think so. First, and this kind of goes into a kind of different part of the conversation, but we do see clients that have tech E&O coverage, right? Or maybe just GL, and it's understanding how a claim can occur, how a cyber event can occur for them, what's being covered and what's not, and where it's covered. And it's kind of the trifecta of if you're an MSP, for example, you want to make sure you have both the tech E&O and the cyber coverage, because there's definitely nuances there, right? Tech E&O, traditional third-party coverage, you're providing a tech service, maybe there's a financial loss to your client because of an error there. That's going to be what's under a tech policy. Cyber is very different. There is some element of third-party coverage there, but you really get into the things like downstream loss, so business interruption, system failure, things like forensic costs, extortion costs. If you're dealing with a threat actor and they're asking for a lot of money, getting access to that. But also, I think there's also really important things to understand outside of just the insurance coverage and the pay for it. It's what you're getting access to, which is qualified law firms, qualified forensic firms. The worst case that you can have is going through a cyber incident, and not knowing who to call, and calling a firm saying, I need help, and the building's on fire. It's going to cost a lot more money. So having pre-qualified rates, those sort of things. It really comes down to almost having an incident response plan, but you're really kind of passing that piece off to the insurance and really relying on experts in that area.
Right, right. There and Sinclair, what's your view as to what do small businesses need to understand that perhaps we're not communicating effectively these days?
Any insurance, right? Insurance is very ambiguous in nature. And I think really kind of what Kyle mentioned is putting it into perspective for them so they can understand, okay, if this scenario happens, here's how this is going to respond. And like what we hear all the time, of course, is do you have cyber insurance? And a business will say, yep, we've got cyber coverage. And it ends up being an endorsement or a rider on their commercial policy. And so, again, the education of, what expenses are caused when an incident happens with responding to and recovering from. And it's a lot more than just breached data that results in a lawsuit, which is what your endorsement or your rider is going to cover. Your liability, not in adequate amounts from what we've seen typically, but none of the downstream, like Kyle mentioned, losses that are incurred. So business loss, business income revenue, reputational damage, forensics coming out, that's going to happen regardless when you file an incident. And all of those costs, notifying impacted parties. So it does mount very quickly. And I think understanding how a policy does, a comprehensive standalone policy does respond to those would make all the difference. So making it easy to understand.
Right. Yeah, I think businesses don't, well, first of all, they don't understand the cyber insurance, and then they also don't understand, how something, how expensive it can be when you have an incident, and that most of the costs, it isn't, it's not the fact that you're going to get sued that could hurt you as much as the costs that you have to get back up and running, and be in a position to compete and have the trust of your clients going forward. That's where the real cost. The average cost of a ransomware attack is $600,000. The average cost of business email compromise, wire transfers, accidentally transferring money to the bad guy, is $171,000. The average cost of business interruption, the lost profits that you incur while you're down, is $1.2 million. Each of those is a big nut for a small business to swallow. You put them all together, and that could really put you out of business here. And and so thinking about trying to figure out how to present that in a way that the businesses can understand. You're really protecting your balance sheet, you're protecting your ability to get back up and running as fast as possible, and you're protecting your ability to survive, through it here, right? And so I do think that those are it's not communicated, as perhaps adequately as it could be here. I think also, don't you think that the past 3 years of hearing how expensive cyber insurance is has also kind of caused some businesses to pause and not think about it, when right now cyber insurance is relatively inexpensive for what you get there. Kyle, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, when I look at quotes, rates, and that, quotes and pricing they're very competitive. It's not that expensive, and that's nice, right? Because we need that for market expansion and those sort of things. You look at the history of cyber insurance, and like the pricing, kind of was like this in the beginning. When you go back like 20 years ago, nobody really knew how to price, and we were figuring that out. Then it was starting to hit pretty low through the teens. And then I kind of say like 2019 was the beginning of the ransomware era, where basically losses, threat actors were able to weaponize ransomware to really any industry class, and losses started to skyrocket. So you saw a hardening of the market, and you saw prices go up. The reason why prices went up is the pricing during what I call the data breach era just wasn't sufficient enough to cover those losses. We came out of the hard market probably in 2022, 2023 at the most, and prices have been getting competitive again. And I think people are seeing the value in that. So Yes, we've heard of, that hard market with those pricing, but I think right now is a good time where the pricing continues to drop. I think we're probably getting to a point where it has to level out again. But it's, worst thing you can do is, not see a quote, I guess, if you will.
Sure. And when we talk about education, we've been talking about the educating that business, but I would argue that the vast majority of insurance brokers out there need to be educated, because they're the ones that usually are talking to the businesses about insurance and what to buy and what not to buy. And the experience that we've seen is that that's not always the case. Is that what you're seeing too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think it's not, obviously not just on the business owner who trusts a broker who's an expert in commercial lines, but may not understand that, cyber risk, you really got to understand a business's unique cyber risk to understand what coverage is adequate for them first, because you don't want to be paying for a policy that offers, 3 million in limits for PCI when that doesn't even necessarily apply to your business. So making sure you have the right coverages in place for your business risk, as well as just understanding how the cyber coverage will respond.
Right. And the dirty secret about brokers is they follow the money, right? And how much time are they really going to spend selling $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 policy where they're only making a couple $100 there to a small business relative to other things that they may need to do there. And I think that somewhat plays in. That's my opinion. I think that sometimes does play into it. Am I going to really, spend a lot of time educating them on something that I don't even really understand there? And then when the carrier comes back and starts asking for all these technical controls to be put in place, then I have to talk to their IT person, and it's I got a golf tee time coming up. I don't have time for this. Kyle, is that too harsh on the broker community?
I think it's tough. I think that's a fair thought. I think there's specialized brokers, as we know, in cyber that know the business well, right? And then when you get past that and you look at more of either the generalized or specialist brokers in other space, it is tough because look at insurance and cyber insurance. It's not that it's complex; it's just very nuanced. And because it's nuanced, it takes a lot of time, and because there's only so much time in the day, it makes it really difficult. I think, again, going back to education, how we do that, the easier we can in the process of education, quoting, binding, all of that, the easier we can make all of that and simplify it. That's kind of our best method. I always like to use examples over explanation when I'm talking to brokers, whoever, for the first time when they're hearing cyber, maybe walking through like, hey, you have a ransomware attack. Let's talk about how coverage can impact that, and these are the different areas that will, because I think people like to visualize better. But it's tough. It's a lot of education, information. Time will be one of the assets of this, right? Over time, things get easier to understand. More people will understand.
Right. And with cyber insurance, and we see this in auto insurance now more and more with the telematics. The Progressive. What is that? The tool that can chart you and your driving habits, and it can impact your premium, the safe driver discounts. We're starting to see that a little bit in the cyber insurance space, where it seems like the cyber carriers are even taking a step further and offering solutions to protect the client. So we have, if you use our managed detection and response service, we can offer you a quote here. Do you see that as something that will continue and to evolve, where the carriers will be offering more of those preventive and or security services, or do you think there'll be another direction that this may go? And Sinclair, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we've seen. I don't know that it will go anywhere in the near future. I think it will probably continue to progress as these, like I mentioned earlier, these businesses who realize either now contractually they're being required to have this line of coverage, and they have not started that process of working with a managed service provider. When they reach out to a carrier, the carrier can now write the insurance and provide the required services. So from that standpoint, I think it does make sense. I think there's a lot of issues with it, some concerns there, conflict of interest, and also just the fact that you're now tying your security to your insurance. So if you do ever want to shop around, you're going to be exposed at some degree while you're transitioning and figuring out all the moving pieces. But yeah, definitely something we're seeing. I don't think, unfortunately, that will be going away anytime soon. We'll see how it plays out.
Right. Kyle, are what areas are you sat on the carrier side? You probably were sitting in those, strategy discussions of what we need to do going forward. What are the carriers talking about these days?
I think this is a really good topic, because I think this is the historical challenge, and I think this kind of goes to why we see so little buyers on the SME space, is because, so for example, if I was to be able to show you behind the scenes in large risk underwriting, it's very complex. You sit down, you spend a lot of time understanding as much as you can, whether through the application process, formal meeting, a couple of other different things. That's obviously not possible. And Doug, this goes back to your comment about earlier about, if you have a couple $1,000 policy, you just can't put too much, quote unquote, manpower into that. So I do think we have to simplify the underwriting process while still doing it to a point where we understand the risk exposure. I think things like telemetry and other things, I think Sinclair brought up some great points about why it might be challenging, but if we can do it in an agnostic way, it can really benefit the marketplace, because then you're kind of cutting out some of that back and forth human touch that becomes a problem in it. I do think it's going to take some time for us to get there, because cyber moves so fast that we really have to take basically the underwriting philosophy of telemetry or other things and almost marry it to past loss data. And that's really challenging, right? Because right now, the goal is to take underwriting information that's completed on an application, and you kind of look at the losses and you say, okay, I'm making this up. If 40% of our clients had MFA in place, we know they wouldn't have had a substantial loss. Well, how can you marry it to the technology implementation? So again, like anything, it'll take time, but I do think it's probably a big part of the future of the small middle market space.
Right. To capture, and I think I think what you mentioned too is there's a difference between coming up with solutions to protect and coming up with solutions that can identify the risk, right? Can identify the presence of certain security controls or maybe possible threats coming into the environment there that enables the carrier to be agnostic as to what technology is there, but still gathering information that can help the client, obviously help in terms of pricing, and improve the ease, of someone actually buying the insurance too. I think that's really important. There, the and we've talked about kind of education. We've talked about educating brokers, educating the clients. The fact that the market is relatively soft, meaning it's more competitive, which is good if you're a buyer. these days. We've also, and I know this is our business at SeedPod, we work with managed service providers, who are providing the good security controls and are diligent and focused on improving the security of their clients. What's the role of technology and those technology service providers on a go forward basis? Do you see that increasing? Do you see that decreasing? Where's that coming in, Sinclair?
Yeah, well, I think that's, kind of lends to what we were just talking about, which carriers are doing, and making it easier and a more holistic approach to the technology, really understanding what the other side is doing. Both pieces really do need to work together. I think a lot of business owners still don't realize that, but as we've seen, the technical requirements like MFA, like endpoint detection and response, they're increasingly being looked for by carriers, because carriers know it mitigates risk of an incident. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Kyle, do you see a growing, shrinking role with the technology support services that surround a business?
I hope it's growing. I think that's the only way for it to go.
Yeah.
I think more is needed, to be honest. And again, that goes back to more education, that sort of thing. But I think it's going to be imperative for the future.
Yeah. When, especially in the small and medium-sized business front, where the vast majority are relying on outsourced organizations to help them, get their network up and running, get that next laptop, make sure that things stay on, right? So they can get their business done. Maybe even in these days, trying to figure out how to make sense of AI. I don't know if they're leaning on their MSP for that now. You would imagine that would be happening. So, for them to, lean on the MSP for, to making sure that they can be up and running and they're secure, it's not a far, reach to say that insurance can be part of that solution, right? Here, and that's part of, the overall risk management that the MSP is providing. So I think you'll start seeing more and more. You're already seeing it today. We're certainly doing it with the solutions that we're putting together, but you'll see more of that kind of, embedded insurance into the technology and the services that are being provided here. Businesses have a lot on their plate, a lot to be thinking about. When they think of technology, most of the time they just want the damn thing to turn on. They want the login to appear. They want to remember their login and get in and do their work. And then, if the bad guys come along, they want to make sure that they have the resources to protect them. And if they do get in, to deal with it in a an efficient, effective manner there. And I think that's where the synergies of technology services combined with the capital that the insurance provides can really go a long way to making that happen, and really making that small and medium-sized business, which, let's face it, is the lifeblood of our growth, right? Our GDP is driven a large part by that. We want to make sure that they're secure in this digital world. So, so I would, if you are a small business and you don't have cyber insurance today, you really owe it to yourself to have that conversation. And now you have a number of directions you can go to. Talk to your broker, or you can talk to your managed service provider. You can talk to your buddy down the block who probably just got hit with a ransomware attack and is tearing their hair out right now there. So, but that's it for this episode. I can't believe, Kyle Sinclair, we went through a half hour. It went like that, right? So thank you, and look forward to talking more in next week. All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Ted.
Yep. See ya.